that's where you wrote a piece that's been circulating in the gun community recently that deals with the application of what you study to the ammunition market in particular. Can you give us a little bit of background on that piece and what your thoughts were, what your arguments were?
Yeah. So what we see across the economy is that in industries where you have a high capital investment, a lot of commodity industries, particularly in the processing area, but also just where you need to put a lot of money in to build factories or other processing units, you see price spikes that are disproportionate to the increase in demand. And that's what you're seeing in the ammunition market. I think when I looked into this market in particular, it's always been very cyclical. There's always been booms and busts and shortages in ways that you didn't typically see in the rest of the American economy. You do see them now in the American economy because of COVID. But what somebody told me about the great ammunition shortage of 2020, and now there's also one in 2021. And I got interested in it because whenever you see a shortage, usually there's a monopoly lurking behind it, or there's some level of market concentration. And just to give you the framework for that, we started looking at the problem of monopoly in America right after the financial crisis. It got kind of more political, and economists started studying it. And what they found is that because of the relaxation of antitrust laws, about 75% of industries in America have become more concentrated since 2000. And that is also true in the gun industry. I don't have to tell you about it, but there has been kind of consolidation so that you effectively have two firms that control ammunition, or that control the domestic stock of ammunition, so excluding imports. And so what I wrote in my newsletter is, I looked at the investor transcripts of, Vista Outdoors just to see what they were saying, because there's this big debate over inflation and market power. And I was like, well, let's look at an individual market like the ammunition market. And what the CEO and some of the other executives were saying was, we're expanding capacity a little bit to meet demand, but really what we're trying to do is we're trying to keep prices high. And what they call it a quote unquote disciplined industry. There's all these euphemisms for ways of saying we're restraining supply, and not always for bad reasons. They don't want to see a crash in the market. But that's what you see when you have it can be airlines, it can be rental cars, lots of different industries. When they talk about a disciplined industry, what they mean is that there are so few competitors that nobody is trying to invest in capacity to take market share. So they're all kind of like either formally or informally colluding to restrict output and keep prices high. And lo and behold, that's what the executives, or at least the Vista executives, were saying. The Olin guys, they're more of a chemical company, so they don't really care that much about their ammunition sector. But that's, or at least their investors don't care that much. But that's what they were saying. So I wrote that up, and that's the gist of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you quote CEO of Vista, his name's Christopher Metz, talking about specifically their acquisition of Remington recently, and Remington's ammo business in particular. And the thing about Vista, a lot of people might not know this. A lot of the average gun owner might not realize that. Like if you walk into a gun store, there's a lot of brands on the shelf, right? There's Federal, Blazer, CCI, American Eagle. There's all kinds of brands, but a lot of them are owned, in fact, by Vista in particular. And then Olin owns, Winchester, which is another really big ammo manufacturer. And so, I guess the bottom line, the argument here sounds like, and it's reflected somewhat in these quotes that you've highlighted in your newsletter, which is, by the way, is big, by Matt Stoller. If people want to read this piece for themselves, I think they should. But effectively, the argument is that there's two conglomerates that dominate the ammo manufacturing market, and they are acquiring other companies in order to have better control over the output of the industry, so that they can avoid the sort of roller coaster effect of the surges in the market, surges and declines, by moderating how much supply is actually out there at any given time. Is that like a fair assessment of the sort of basic argument here as to why, as to what's going on and how it relates to price increases on ammunition?
Absolutely. I mean, the quote, and this wasn't from the CEO, but it was from the head of ammunition for Vista. They said that the most important reason for the Remington acquisition was, quote, added capacity to Vista without increasing the overall market capacity. That's a euphemism for saying we're not expanding the amount of capacity in the market, so we have more pricing power. And what you've talked about, where there are a lot of brands, but there's just one or two companies behind the brands, is actually something that you see in most markets at this point. When you go to the supermarket and you see a bunch of cereal, lots of different brands, or you see a bunch of different toothpaste brands, they're all really owned, and beer, same thing. Like, they're all really owned often by one or two companies. And beer is a little bit different because you do actually still have you have craft brews for interesting reasons. But even there, you're seeing a lot of acquisitions. And so what you have with the ammunition market, where most of the brands are owned by Vista, is that's common, and it's for the same reason. They want control of. Everybody wants to set prices, right? That's what you want. You want market power because best business model in the world. What Warren Buffett called the toll booth, right? And not when you control, when you have market power, you have a toll booth.